What's going on everyone, Bobbybarks here, and welcome to my review for The Last of Us Episode 1. This is your spoiler warning, so if you've not watched the episode yet, be prepared to be spoiled, or turn off now. The opening scene starts us out in 1968, with actor John Hannah playing Dr. Newman, explaining how a fungus outbreak could cause a worldwide pandemic. It gives us a little insight into how the cordyceps virus works, which is establishing the premise for the show's setting, and how we end up in a post-apocalyptic universe. The scene ends with the presenter moving from a laid-back, mockery-type attitude to a bit of an uncomfortable gulp. The intro scene shares the music from the intro to the video game, and the imagery is both beautiful and disturbing, as it depicts the fungus spreading across America and ending with shadowy images of Joel and Ellie looking for the light. The episode is titled When You're Lost in the Darkness, which is a reference again to the Firefly's motto, but you could say it's also a reference to Joel's character. We're introduced to Joel and Sarah in 2003, which is a slight difference to the game, as most of us know that was 2013. However, just like the game, we're following Sarah pretty much as the main character. We do see a lot more of Sarah in the show than we did in the game, with a more in-depth look into the day before the outbreak occurs. There's also some nice little Easter eggs as we go along. Halleck Drops is the name of the band on the t-shirt that Sarah's wearing at the beginning of the show and in the game. There's no real significance for the band in the game other than a few posters, but the back of the t-shirt does foreshadow how the game plays out, with each tour stop another location that Ellie and Joel visit throughout their journey. There's also a neat little nod to Curtis and the Viper 2, which Sarah picks up from the neighbour's house, pulled from a shelf alongside the likes of Pink Panther and Murderball. Unlike those two, though, Curtis and the Viper 2 isn't a real movie, but it's still an important one. People who've played The Last of Us Part 2 will remember it tearfully. It's brought up in the second game as a cheesy 80s movie, but one that was going to mean a lot to the two people watching it. Speaking of the neighbour's house, that scene with the granny was rather disturbing. I'll be keeping one eye on my grandma for the foreseeable future. But this is where the show is great. Director Craig Mazin is smart with really effective touches about what he leaves in the distance. Only getting the tiniest glimpse of what happens to the neighbours after Tommy runs them over is terrifying. That does a better job of telling you all you need to know about how this thing spreads than seeing what Joel and Tommy saw in town, or getting some ham-handed TV news bulletin spelling everything out. When we get to the part where society's collapsing, it's a carefully orchestrated brand of chaos that escalates, even as we, as viewers, and those of us that played the game, know that all hope is lost before the characters even get there. The ride into town offers dribbles of dread, the house on fire, the family trying to hitch a ride, and the distinct white-knuckle sensation of driving the wrong way down a highway. Once they arrive in the town, the giant groups of terrified citizens are almost more unsettling in their uninfected form. A very savvy way to embrace the visual language of the game without sacrificing any tension or storytelling power. It's maybe the most effective in-car 360-degree camera work I've seen in television, and replicating the game setting at night really adds to the feeling the three people in that car are driving on a one-way ticket to hell, which they pretty much arrive at with the plane crash, the car flip, and then everyone's fate is pretty much sealed. The bait and switch of Sarah being our main entry into the outbreak day, only to have her die hours later, is wrenching enough. It brought back significant memories and emotions for me, no matter how many times I've played through it or will watch it on the show. As a father of daughters, it really does hit home for me. There's no poetic goodbye moment here. Sarah just dies in total fear without any real last words to offer up to Joel. He holds on to that watch because there's not much else from that night to hold in physical or memory form. He can't even latch onto the face of the officer who shot them, only a beam from a flashlight, and that alone feels enough to harden someone as much as Joel has been hardened. The show has a visual medium that translates internationally in a way that is able to capitalise so well on those light touches that don't need any explanation. Using the Boston Kid's shoes as a signifier is the kind of non-verbal storytelling we're used to seeing on screen, particularly when it's an entry point into a new world. It's stuff like the introduction to the red-green testing system, casually done off-centre and unemphasised, that makes the after half of the episode feel immediate and lived in. That extends through to Joel hauling the kid to the mass grave after he's been euthanized. He carries the boy just like he did with Sarah at the end of his last peaceful night with her. Instead of gently laying her in bed, he's tossing in more fuel for the corpse fire. a ruthless, efficient way to show how broken this guy has become over the span of 2 decades. It doesn't come as any surprise that Pascal is terrific as the gruff, grumpy Joel, as he's pretty much great in any role he plays. What was unexpected for me, though, is just how much he resembles Joel from the game. His voice is a close match with Troy Baker's original portrayal of the character, but what's even more striking is his physicality. When you see him from behind, he at times looks uncannically like the game model. It's an added bonus that Pascal looks and sounds so much like the Joel us fans already know. But looks aside, Pascal's portrayal is simply riveting. When the story jumps ahead 20 years and we find Joel in a ravaged Boston, working macabre odd jobs for Fedra, you can feel the years of brutal post-apocalyptic survivalism and grieving for Sarah has taken its toll on him, and it's harbouring some serious regret and self-loathing. And as someone who was a huge fan of both games, in particular Part 1, and not just the story but also the multiplayer, that's right, for those of you that didn't know, The Last of Us has a multiplayer which is called Factions, and it was great to hear the Factions theme tune played over one particular scene in this episode. In fact, the whole soundtrack from The Last of Us games was brought to you by Gustavo Santaolalla, and it was great to hear his tunes again expressed in the TV show. Moving on to Ellie, and Bella Ramsey was a standout on Game of Thrones as the fearless Lyanna Mormont, and her natural ability to embody somebody beyond her years despite her age and diminutive stature is on full display in her turn as Ellie as well. Much was made of Ramsey's appearance as Ellie when the actor was announced as part of the cast. There may be every chance that critics are silenced from the get-go because Ramsey is immediately affable. The chemistry between Joel and Ellie is immediate. In fact, Ramsey, Pascal and Torv don't feel like they're just copying their video game counterparts. They've brought their own take on the material, but the material itself, particularly the dialogue, doesn't stray far from the game's script, at times lifting lines word for word, and this is such a good thing considering how strong the source material is. The show also absolutely nails the aesthetic of the games and adapts it to the television seamlessly. The earth tones, rich lighting, the stark levels of saturation, the vegetation, and even the foliage overtaking abandoned buildings and roads, it all feels just right. And I'm sure most of you watching this will have already experienced this world firsthand on the game. You can almost smell the desecration and despair wafting through the Boston streets. This was a chilling symphony of an opening episode which destroys one world, creates another, and expertly sets up a precise and punishing season of television. Just one last note from me, listen to the lyrics carefully of Never Let Me Down Again by Depeche Mode as the credits roll. It's an 80s song, and in Joel's book, that means trouble, which is exactly where the show is going to take us. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed the review, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye for now.